All right. Share my screen. Uh, sure. Whoa, that was kind of interesting. All right, we're good to go, I think. All right. So today what I'd like to go over is the different types of groups that we tend to deliver within the human services situation. So the first one is psychosocial support groups. These are groups that have an educational component, but they allow individuals to come in with the same common issues, such as domestic violence survivor groups, sometimes offender groups. There's certain types of initial treatment for addiction groups. And so it has kind of two purposes. One is to educate and process information, but it's mainly meant to show that you're not alone. When you're a victim of domestic violence, for example, you feel like you're the only one in the world that gets abused and treated awfully. Okay. And this type of group allows you to see other people are going through the same, not while similar things that you're going through. And so you're not alone in the world. Okay. The second type of group that we'll be talking about is a treatment group. A treatment group has very specific protocol that is meant to provide coping skills and processes that will alleviate some type of symptom that the individual is going through. So we have treatment group for depression, we have treatment groups for substance abuse, we have treatment groups for anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. These all have a specific protocol that are meant to alleviate symptoms that are associated with a given ailment that a person has. And then the third type of group that we'll talk about today is what is known as a process group. A process group is usually ran after a psychosocial support group or a treatment group that allows an individual to, in a very safe environment, once they have all the coping skills or the or treatment that is necessary for them to go then a level deeper and allows them to process what they've gone through at a deeper level. Okay. And so it's not usually done initially. Process groups are really it's really a bad idea to do a process group in the early stages of treatment or initial intake of an individual. These are usually done when the person has gone through some type of treatment, some type of psychoeducational group, some type of thing, and they've gotten out of the situation that they were in. And now it's time to really dig deeper into what was the cause, what was the process that led them to that ailment that they're going through. Okay, we're going to do this in using trauma recovery, um, so that we have kind of this idea of trauma, which was one of the video lectures that I assigned. So I'm hoping you all are coming in with an idea of what a trauma is, what PTSD is. And so I hope you can recall those and look at your notes as we go through this process. So that was a lecture. It wasn't the last Saturday, but I think it was the Saturday before that was assigned as one of the video lectures for that week. I think it was my broken foot week. But let's go through this and see where it is. So, what are we trying to do? We're going to explore the differences between these three types of groups. To understand the unique role in healing trauma caused by things like domestic violence, loss, or a cancer diagnosis. So these are kind of the three traumas that we will be dealing with. So we will be dealing with domestic violence or relationship violence. We'll be dealing with the loss of someone close to us. A lot of groups focus on, for example, parents who lose a child. And there's also groups that are done for children who have lost a parent or parents in some cases. And then the other type of trauma that we will look at is being diagnosed with a very chronic illness, such as cancer. And so those are kind of the things we're going to go through. And the structure we're going to do is we're going to give some definitions to each of these type of groups, give the key characteristics, and then the targeted benefits. And then we're going to do some comparison case applications for each of these within each of these three different type of trauma domains. So that's kind of what we'll be doing over this next while that we'll be together. So let's start with psychosocial support groups. Okay. And just to read the definition, it is a structured group that provides emotional and social support to individuals sharing a common traumatic experience. Okay. And the real purpose is to normalize feelings and to reduce isolation. Again, when we look at, for example, in the field of domestic violence, one of the strategies that abusers use is isolation. They isolate the victim from their family, friends. They regulate when they go to work, when they don't go to work. They regulate even who they interact with in the workplace. That's a strategy that many domestic abusers use to keep control over their victim. And so it makes the individual feel that they're all alone in the world, and they're the only one that is experiencing what they're going through. So one of the goals of the psychosocial support group is to make them feel like they're not alone in this world. When we look at, for example, um, loss of a loved one, it reducing isolation and normalize feelings comes into the idea that a lot of people feel like, well, everyone loses someone, but why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? Why am I suffering the way I'm suffering? Okay. And it kind of gives into what's called, I don't mean to insult, or this is not an insultive term, but they go through what they think is crazy thinking. Why are they the only one who has lost their parent or lost their child and feels the way they do? Everyone loses someone. And what these psychosocial support groups are meant to do is to make it so that individual doesn't feel like they're going crazy, that losing someone close to you and those feelings are normal, and you're supposed to go through those. We're supposed to go through a grief process. And so it allows the individual to see other people suffer too. Okay. The other thing that's not on here is the educational part. In psychosocial support groups, there's usually you'll note it by the term up here, structured group. There's topics each week that the facilitator goes over. So, for example, when I did domestic violence survivor groups, we did the power and control group, and each group we went over one of the power and control things. The one that I just talked about, for example, isolation, and then there's financial, and then there's all these other types of things that abusers use to keep their victim where they want to keep their victim. Okay. And so that's the other component of a psychosocial social group that's kind of missing in this slide. Okay. So, but it gets to these key features. One, it's peer-led or facilitated by a professional. Some peer-led group examples are, for example, AA groups are a good example of psychosocial support groups because they're usually led by some peer in the group. Domestic violence survivor groups are usually led by a advocate or a therapist or someone who is trained in the field of domestic uh, abuse. But in some situations, such as metropolitan areas, they might train a lead survivor to then lead those groups. Okay. So it can either be peer-led or facilitated by a professional. A lot of grief groups are peer-led. Okay. Is that they kind of hand the torch off to the next person. Okay. And the emphasis, the key feature, and I can't express this enough about psychosocial support groups, is they emphasize shared experience and mutual support. It's meant to be this area, this space in which people who are going through a common issue can come together and support each other. And that's the main feature of a psychosocial support group. Okay, so let's go on now. Let's go to a treatment group. Okay, now you'll note in the definition right here, this is a professionally facilitated group focused on achieving therapeutic outcomes through a structured intervention. Okay, this is a group that uses a structured curriculum that is facilitated by either a master or above level person. I'm going to qualify that here in just a minute. So kind of put a kind of a highlight that for just a minute to achieve some therapeutic outcome. And that's usually reduction in symptoms. All right. So, for example, the purpose to address symptoms or issues related to things like PTSD, depression. What are some other treatment type groups? There is a domestic violence abuser treatment group. There's not very many survivors. Survivors of cancer and whatnot are usually put in a PTSD treatment group if that's necessary. Um, Let me think of uh, other type of treatment groups. There are some schizophrenia treatment groups. There is addiction treatment groups. And anyways, okay. So it's meant to reduce the symptomology through some type of structured intervention. Now I'm going to go back to the professionally facilitated because there is some treatment groups that and this is why, for example, you can become nationally certified as an addiction specialist because there are some well-structured interventions that a bachelor or even someone with an associate's degree can facilitate under the supervision of a licensed master's or doctorate level counselor or addiction treatment person. And this is where I'm gonna qualify this notation of professionally facilitated group is especially within the field of addiction because it's such a huge problem. And within the field of loss and post-traumatic stress issues that um, there are trained associate or bachelor level individuals who then go and facilitate those groups and do that. And also, there are a lot of youth groups that utilize associate or bachelor level individuals. I had a person in the spring semester who did loss treatment for adolescents. And they also did treatment groups for children who are now in their adolescence who had been abused as children. And they used a manualized treatment modality, not a thing, modality to facilitate those groups. So in a treatment group, it can be it can be overseen by a licensed mastered professional, but it can be delivered by someone with their associate's or bachelor's degree, or even in some cases, they don't even need their associate's degree. They just need to have a good heart. Okay. So again, the purpose of a treatment group is to address specific symptoms and issues, PTSD, depression. Some examples of groups are and this is kind of the gold standard within at least the therapy group setting is the cognitive behavioral therapy group tr for trauma. When we get to relapse prevention, because I know that you probably heard CBT, da 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 over and over. We'll get to cognitive behavioral therapy when we get to relapse prevention, just so you see how that works. Because I know that you probably have heard this term if you've done even introduction to social work, all of those classes, if you've done the addiction classes, if you did the abnormal psych class, you probably heard this term over and over. We'll get to what this is very specifically next Saturday. So please kind of put a check mark there if you're not very clear on what cognitive behavioral therapy is. We'll get to it. Support for cancer patients addressing anxiety and coping mechanism is another way that treatment groups can be used. Um, the key features, though, of a treatment group versus a psychosocial group. Um, a psychosocial support group, as I said, has an educational component and a support component. But at no point do we measure some outcome. Does the victim understand their trauma? Does the victim under the survivor, I should use the word survivor because they're survivors. Does the survivor understand what they've gone through now? Okay. But with a treatment group, we are constantly measuring where they are in their therapeutic process. So, one, we use an evidence-based therapeutic technique, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, and there's a lot of others um, that we can mention.
Your AirPods keep connecting to my phone.
But the other thing about a treatment group is we're constantly measuring where they are. So, for example, I facilitated a depression group a while back. I was doing it for it was for a peer support thing, but every week after the group, we would give them the Beck Depression Inventory. And this goes to the goal oriented with measurable outcomes. So at the end of the treatment group, we'd have them go, we did the short form. So it was just a 6 question Beck depression inventory, and we'd have them fill that out. Okay. And then that would be the basis for our next treatment group. Are people getting better or are they getting worse? Are their symptoms the same? Whatnot? And that would guide then what we would do for the next treatment group. Okay. So a treatment group is very structured. It's manualized, if you want to say, and either every group or every other group, we have some type of measure. We have an inventory of some type. We have a check-in of some type, which the clients in the group setting say, I'm feeling better. I've implemented these things and they work well or they don't work. But we monitor the progress of the client. Okay. And so that's the notation of a treatment group. Okay. Now let's talk about a process group, which is again something you do either after a psychosocial group or after a treatment group. I am going to encourage you guys in this, in being very professional in this aspect, because there's a lot of organizations that just throw everything at their client. And so they'll put them in a treatment group, a psychoeducational group, and at the same time, they'll say, let's go to the process group too. If you see that, if you're a facilitator of a process group and your client says, well, I'm doing the domestic survivor psychoeducational group right now, be a professional and say, okay, this group you do after that group. Okay. And this is the reason why, gang, is when a process group is done during a therapeutic group or a psychoeducational group, it can do a lot of damage to the individual. Because in both of those other two types of groups, you're trying to get them to the point where they can exist in the world they're existing in right now, functionally. And you're giving them the skills and helping them develop the skills to exist. A process group is when you have those skills and those coping mechanisms that when you go to a deepened self-awareness, which is this purpose, if you look under purpose, deepened self-awareness and enhanced emotional expression and relational skills, that you have those coping mechanisms in place to do that deep dive into those. Okay. So I just want to emphasize that. Please, gang, be professional about this. I have never seen a successful outcome for someone who is doing a process group and a therapeutic group at the same time. It always ends up that they go back into the abusive cycle. They go back into depression or anxiety or PTSD. They go back into addiction. Okay. I'm just putting that out there, and the literature and the research will support this. So let's go on. What is a process group? It's a therapeutic group that focuses on exploring emotions, behaviors, and interpersonal dynamics that have arisen because of the individual's situation. The purpose is to give a deepened self-awareness of what the individual has gone through so that they can avoid that in the future. An enhanced emotional expression, it gives them skills that, okay, I have the coping skills, right, from the therapy group and the psychoeducational group to deal with this, but I want to become a complete person. I want to become me, who I am. And so it provides an enhanced emotional expression and relational skills to allow that individual to become a complete person outside of being a domestic violence survivor, beyond their cancer diagnosis, beyond being even if we want to say that survivor of schizophrenia, a person who has adult with ADHD, an adult with bipolar. It allows them to try and begin that beginning of not just surviving their disorder, but thriving. It allows them that ability to become them completely. Some examples from this survivors of domestic violence process emotional wounds. Okay. And those are very hard to overcome. The, when someone physically hits you, that wound will heal over time. You'll come to redefine it. It wasn't as bad as it was, and whatnot. But emotional wounds tend to stick with us. They tend to have a long-term presence. Even when we have the coping skills, the therapeutic skills to deal with them, and I'm going to use the word deal, they still are there. And we become frightful of other people. We become wary of engaging in our social world. We engage in a lot of social categorization. So many domestic violence survivors, after going through relationship after relationship that is domestically abused, come to determine that all men are abusers, or if they're a male that is a victim, all women are abusers. And that becomes a safety mechanism for them. And through the therapeutic and psychosocial group process, it becomes a way to protect oneself. What a process group allows you to do is to open up and experience new things. And I'm going to give one example. I did, and I do this uh, I give this example in my Psych 101 classes and whatnot, is when it comes to emotions and feelings and whatnot, is I did process groups for several years for domestic violence survivors, and it was so wonderful when survivors came to me and they said, Mr. Peterson or Curtis or whatever they wanted to call me. I really never really cared. Um, I'm ready to put myself out there again. I'm on my own. I'm strong, but I really would love someone to love. And in this process, group process, we said, okay, let's do this. Let's make this happen for you. They've gone through the psychoeducational group process. Many of them went through post-traumatic trauma group treatment groups. And so I'm like, okay, you guys have the skills and you have the ability to deal with the realities of the world. But this is a thing we did in the process groups. We said, we agreed, you don't go date people you're comfortable with. You go date the person that you think is not your type, not your person, not your, this, that turns you on, all those things. And that was a challenge in a process group that I gave to some of my survivors. And I said, you can't date the people you like, you love, you feel safe with. Why? Because the people you like, the people you love, the people you feel safe with hurt you. All right. And so this is the thing that we do in process groups. So when those individuals came up, they were told to date people they weren't comfortable with. All right. And this is the cool thing about a process group because they have the skills and the abilities to deal with. They did. And I will tell you, I talked to one of my survivor groups from a process group in 2016, and she's like, damn it, you were right. Dr. Peterson, you were right. I when in that group you told me to go date somebody I wasn't comfortable with, and I did. And now I finished my bachelor's degree. I haven't been hit, I haven't been criticized. I haven't done anything for 10 years. I've been with this person. I've been with this person for 10 years. We're happily married. My girls are going through school. They're attending school. One of them is going to graduate with honors in high school. But then she said, but I have to be honest with you. I have to be honest with you. And she said, that damn process group. I hated that process group because it took me 2 years to actually fall in love with the love of my life, the love that protects me, honors me, tells me good things. It took me 2 years to fall in love with them. And that's what a process group is about, is going beyond just surviving and doing the things that are counter to what led a person to the situation that they were in. And that person is now an elementary teacher. Uh, and that's amazing. And I want you to think about that when it comes to the process group situation. Okay. All right. So that's process group. And now let's talk about, okay, so we're going to go back. Whoa, we went ahead. So I just want to emphasize the key differences between each of these groups. Okay. So we're going to look at facilitation, focus, structure, and goals. And you can see we have each of the different treatment modalities here. So facilitation, they're peer-led, professional-led. It can be either or. On the professional end, it can be someone who has training to lead that group on a educational level. On the peer-led, it's someone who has gone through that treatment group. And I did want to bring up another example of a peer-led group that I talked about survivor groups, but one peer-led group that I also did was a father group for dads who had been incarcerated and they were not quality fathers. All right, they were uh, um, well, let's just say they weren't quality people at all. All right. But one of the things that they needed to do when they were released is to regain a relationship with their children. We'll just put it that way. And so this was a father group to teach men how to be fathers. Um, and the cool thing about that group, and I always love that group, is at the end of the group, there was a barbecue at the end of the group where those men did a barbecue for it, even if it was their ex-wife, their girlfriend that they had a child with, they would invite them regardless of their relationship, and they would have their children come. All right. And at the end of the group, they all cooked a barbecue for their what is it called? Their mother baby, their mother. What is that term? I know there's called uh, uh, there's something called the daddy person. But anyways, they invited. Oh, did someone put it in the chat? Baby mama. Yes, they invited the baby mama and they invited the children and it was such a great thing to see these men who came in and wanted nothing to do with their children, thought that they were worthless. And then at the end of a 16-week session, there they were actually nurturing their children and treating their baby mamas like mothers instead of enemies. And it was a cool thing. Anyways, I'm sorry, I'm having a nostalgic moment with that group. But the thing going back to the psychosocial educational support group is at the end of that group. one of the fathers or two of the fathers were chosen then to lead the next group of fathers instead of it being led by someone like me, a professional, whatever. And so and so that group went on and on and on because then those fathers at the end of that next group chose the next facilitating fathers. And it was kind of a cool thing. I don't know if it's still going. That was up north. I don't know. And but anyways, that was kind of a cool thing to happen. Anyways, okay, going on. Treatment groups and process groups are professionally led only. Okay. There has been some movement for peer to peer. There's been the peer support program that has been advocated on the state level. And I just want to emphasize this point at right here is when I was in Montana, the state of Montana asked us to do analysis of what's called peer support programs, where peers that have gone through the treatment process then go and support individuals who are coming into it, whether it be addiction or some type of mental illness or whatnot. And this is why I'm going to advocate that these two the treatment group and the process group should only be led by professionals, okay, or trained or overseen by professionals, okay, is that what we found when we did the analysis in the state of Montana is when a peer did a treatment modality or a process modality, it only benefited with those who had a severe illness. Hi, sweetheart. It did not, it actually made people who had mild symptomology or moderate symptomology, it actually made their symptoms worse. It actually it didn't work. It made them worse, not better. So what I'm going to say for this class, since it's a 200 level class and whatnot, do not do a treatment group or a process group that is peer led. It's a mistake. They need to be trained. They need to have the skills. They need to um, be at that level. Okay. So I'm just going to leave it at that based on those analyses that were done. The focus, let's go through the focus. Uh, for psychosocial support groups, it's emotional support and shared experience. Now, we have the emotional support and shared experience on the psychosocial and then after this, we get over to the process group, which is emotional processing. So once they have skills to deal with the emotional experience, the behavioral experience, the cognitive experience, then we can go and start processing it and really get down to the dynamics of it for an understanding. The treatment group, of course, is the symptom reduction, the skill building. Okay. This is where we get into how do I deal with my PTSD symptoms? What do I do when I have a triggering event with my addiction? These are those things that are initially needed before we get into emotional processing and relational dynamics. Okay, so now structure. Um, so on a psychosocial end, there is topics. Okay, so there are topics that we go through each week, and it tends to be, we talk about this. We can look at, for example, anger management. Anger management has a 24 week session where each week there's a topic we go through. But it is flexible because it's a discussion base. We go through how do I manage an anger moment, right? I can do X, Y, and Z. And then we have a discussion based on this. Can you do that? Right. And so again, it's a now let's go on then to the treatment. This is very structured and intervention based. This is this is the initial treatment for someone with addiction. We're not even to relapse prevention. This is where we're at. This is your addiction. We need to alleviate these symptoms, these cravings, all of those things so that we can get you on to a relapse prevention. We can get you on to a process group. These are the things we need to go through. Post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma disorder, all of those things. It's a very structured intervention-based system. In the process groups, they're semi-structured, but because they're very interaction-based. By the time you get to a process group, the idea that I'm just going to sit through the group and just listen and understand what people are going through doesn't work anymore. By the time you get to a process group, you have the ability that you're going to talk, you're going to interact, you're going to understand. Okay. And so now let's talk about the goals. Again, the main purpose of a psychosocial education group is not just about the education component, it's about normalizing feelings and creating connection, making the person feel like they're not this isolated person. In a treatment, it's about symptom management and measurable outcomes, as we discussed. Okay. And then let's talk the last part of a process group is emotional insight and personal growth. So now that I have healed my wounds, I have the bandage over it, how can I create growth from it? All right. And so that's kind of the goal behind a process group. Okay. So application, let's talk about application of each of these. So psychoeducational group provides safe space for survivors to share experience. For a treatment group that's address trauma symptoms using CBT or trauma-focused therapy. And for a process to explore trust, self-esteem, and relational patterns post-abuse. All right. And my example of my example of individuals going and dating people they weren't comfortable with is an example of relational patterns post-abuse. Because just because they've gone through treatment and psychoeducational group does not change their emotional patterns or their relational patterns. The process group allows individuals to challenge those emotions and those relationship patterns. Okay. All right. Application for loss of a loved one. Psychoeducational group sharing circles to normalize mourning and the grief process. Treatment groups. Interventions for complicated grief and depression. And process, discuss and process unresolved feelings about loss. Right? Let's talk about cancer diagnosis. For psychosocial support groups, it's peer support to navigate shared challenges of treatment and survivorship. For treatment, it's focused on managing anxiety and emotional resilience. And then for process, it's that existential question about who I am now as a person with a disease versus who I was before. Has that changed? We don't know. That's what this group is about. All right. All right. So I'm going to give some concluding remarks on this. Each group type addresses a unique aspect of trauma recovery. That's an important component. We usually start with psychosocial treatment and then process. Psychosocial support groups foster connection, treatment groups target symptoms, and process promote deep emotional healing. Okay, and so the key takeaway for this part of this lecture is understanding the distinctions to ensure appropriate group placement for trauma survivors. And I'm going to tell you guys this, to be honest with you, I've known it doesn't matter if a person who has gone through domestic violence for 20, 30 years, or they just newly experienced it. They start at the psychosocial level. No matter their knowledge of what they've gone through, they need to start at the psychosocial, then the treatment, then the process. Because whether you're new to it, and this is true for addiction, this is new for mental illness, no matter how long someone has gone through what they've gone through, they need to start at the beginning and go through the complete process. And this is the hard part about this is in our system, a person comes in and says, "Well, I've been dealing with this for 30 some odd years and I know everything about it." Okay. No, you don't because you're still in it. You're still an addict. You're still in domestic violence relationships. You still abuse people. You still have depression. So no, no matter how long you've been in it, you're still in it. And that's the hard part about becoming a professional in this field. And I'm going to get off my soapbox right here and just say this. No matter how long someone has experienced their dysfunction, we all have to restart at the beginning and go through the process. And this is a lesson not only in the formal psychosocial treatment process, group process, this is life. Um, and it's the way things are, I think, are the natural process of things. Anyways, I'm going to get off that soapbox for a moment because I'm being nostalgic about some of the people that have successfully gone through addiction treatment with me, who have gone through domestic violence survivor, fathers groups, abuser groups, and everything else, because they all, no matter how long they had experienced what they went through, they all started at the beginning and went through the end. And that is success. It took them many tries, took them many attempts, and took them all of those things. But in the end, I'm very proud of everyone who goes through the process, goes through what they need to go through. Anyways, okay, I'm getting nostalgic. I'm getting, anyways, I'm going to stop